Hi guys, so this video is just going to give you an overview of the Leaving Cert Biology Exam for 2022, the structure of the paper, any changes that there's going to be, and then a couple of predictions which possibly might come up on the paper in June. So the layout of the exam is not really going to change this year. It's still going to have a section A, a section B and a section C. The only difference is the amount of questions in each section and the number of questions which you're required to answer. So in section A, it's still the short answer questions. There's 7 questions this time. You're only required to answer 4 and each question carries 20 marks. Section B then is going to be the experiments. Again, there's going to be 3 questions. That's always been the case. You're only required to answer 1. It used to be 2, it's now 1, and each question carries 30 marks. And then section C, which is the long answer questions, used to be 6 questions here, they're now 7 questions, and instead of having to answer 4, you only have to answer 3. Each question is going to carry 60 marks, and the last 2 questions are going to have internal choice. Now, up until last year when it first changed, it used to be internal choice, you choose 2 of A, B, C, but now it's choose 2 of A, B, C, D. So there's even more choice there for you to choose from. Now, what this means, because there's less questions to be answered, is the total paper is now worth 290 marks rather than what used to be 400 marks. Now, I'm just going to quickly talk about the course structure, and this will make sense in a couple of minutes when I talk about the breakdown of the exam paper. So if we have a quick look there, you can see just glancing at it that Unit 1 is considerably smaller than Unit 2 and Unit 3. So Unit 1, the only topics that are part of that is the scientific method, food and ecology. Unit 2 has things like photosynthesis, respiration, DNA, RNA, genetics, and then Unit 3 is everything to do with plants and animals. So it's much, much bigger than the other 2 units. Now, why this is important for us is because even though Unit 1 comprises of only 3 topics, it actually accounts for about 34% of your final paper. Now, how does this make any sense? Well, up until this point, Section A would have 2 questions appearing in the short answers. It varies in the experiments, and then 1 question appearing in the long questions. So because you had to answer, or have to answer 4 of the short questions, if you answer the 2 of them to do with food, scientific method and ecology, that's half the short question marks available. And because you only have to answer 3 long questions, and 1 of them are going to be on food, scientific method and ecology, that's 1/3 of the marks for the long questions. So, given the fact that 2 short questions and 1 long question will be asked about the scientific method, food and ecology, I would highly, highly recommend knowing those 3 topics in detail. Okay? And then if you combine that with the 22 experiments in the course, you have a grand total of 45% roughly already. Now, this might change slightly for this year's exam. What do I mean by that? Well, it used to be that the short answers would have 2 from Unit 1, 2 from Unit 2 and 2 from Unit 3. 1 long question from Unit 1, 2 long questions from Unit 2 and 3 long questions from Unit 3. That could change slightly, but even on the paper last year, which had the same changes, it pretty much ended up being the exact same thing. So definitely food, scientific method and ecology, 100% would know those, and then we'll bulk that up with the additional topics after as well. Now, a couple of tips for the individual sections. The short answer questions, roughly about 30 minutes to spend on these. If you can, I would answer all the questions because you're going to be marked on your best ones. They are short answer questions, so 1-line answers or even sometimes 1-word answers are more than enough, but it's really important here that you know your definitions and you just get straight to the point. So knowing your keywords, knowing your definitions, knowing all the associated terminology to do with the chapters is really important here because you need those keywords to get the marks. Now, I'd also recommend reading through all the questions at the start and putting a question mark or an X beside the ones you're unsure of, and then come back to these at the end if you've got time. And if you're in doubt, put something down, make a guess, because if you leave it blank, you're guaranteed to get no marks, but if you put an answer down, there's a chance you're going to get some marks. So try not leave any blanks on the paper. And the big thing with the short questions is just practice, practice and practice, because you'll notice as you're going through the exam papers, the questions are very, very repetitive. Pretty much the same kind of question is asked all the time to do with particular topics. So definitely make sure that you're practicing them as much as you can. Now, the Section B experiments, there's 3 questions here. You only have to answer 1 of them and it will be worth 10% of your final grade. You should have time because you still have 3 hours to do the full paper. You should have time to do more, so I would answer more than 1 if you can, and your best question will be awarded. Now, there's 22 experiments in total. I'd recommend knowing them all in detail, but if you are struggling with the content, the new changes are going to help you with that, and we'll talk through that in a second. So the scientific method, preparing the animal and plant cell slides, the isolation of DNA experiment, germination experiments, and the enzyme experiments are the ones that seem to come up more often than the others. Now, these were the experiments that have come up as far as 2020. I'll go through it in a little bit more detail later on as well about 2021 and what appeared there and what we can hopefully expect for 2022. But just what I was saying there, we can see that the IAA experiment, we have the isolation from DNA experiments, the animal plant cell experiments, and the germination experiments, and then the enzyme experiments as well. They're the ones that seem to come up a little bit more often than others. A trend that's kind of been happening in recent years as well is that multiple experiments will come up. So rather than question 8, say for example, focusing exclusively on just one experiment, it might ask a couple of questions to do with 4 or 5 different experiments. So that's why you see as you move from left to right, there seems to be some years where a lot more experiments are asked compared to previous years. Now, for 2022, there's been a couple of changes. So the 3 experiment questions are going to be question 8, question 9, and question 10. And question 8, the only experiments they can ask you there are the food tests, ecology, the animal and plant cell experiments, and the isolation of DNA from plant tissue. Nothing else can be asked there. Question 9 is prepare and show the production of alcohol by yeast, the photosynthesis experiment, enzyme experiments, the enzyme mobilization, and any activities to demonstrate osmosis. And question 10 is to investigate the growth of leaf yeast using agar plates, prepare the transverse section of a dicot stem, the heart dissection, the effective exercise and breathing rate or pulse rate, the plant IAA experiment, starch agar or skimmed milk plates to show digestive activity during germination, and then the effect of water, oxygen and temperature on germination. So we can see there's a lot more experiments in question 10, a little bit less in question 9, and less again in question 8. So if you're really struggling with content at this point, you could choose which experiments you're going to focus on. So for example, you could decide, you know what, question 9 is where the experiments I'm most comfortable with are, so I'm going to really know those in detail and I'm going to answer question 9. Now that obviously means you're hedging your bets and you're hoping that nice questions will come up, but at least you know what's going to be asked as part of question 9. Question 8 again is the shortest, and if we think back to what we seen a couple of minutes ago, there's the ecology, there's food. So if you prepare food, scientific method and ecology, it's really covering all your bases for the entire exam. Now, section C, the long answer questions. Here we can spend up to about 2 hours on them, so 100 to 120 minutes. Read through each question to help you decide which ones to answer, and make sure you read through the entire question as well, not just the part A and the part B, because you might be able to answer the first 2 parts, but then as you actually get down throughout the question, you might start to find the parts a little bit more difficult, and it might not actually be a question that's suitable to you at all. You have to answer 3 questions, but again, if you have time, I'd answer an extra one. And just make sure you're including enough points for full marks. So we know everything's marked in 3s. So a 6-mark question is going to need 2 points, a 9-mark question is going to need 3 points, and so on. So just make sure you're putting down enough information that you're going to get your full marks. So common topics that will appear here: genetics, photosynthesis, respiration, ecology. They're all very common topics. They generally appear most years, if not all years. Again, that could change, but those 4 topics will be key for this section. And again, just like the short answer questions, it's all about practice, practice, practice. So at this point, exam papers and marking schemes should be your best friend. We're doing them again and again and again. You should be getting to a point where you're able to do the questions without glancing at your notes. You'll pretty much know the marking schemes inside out and upside down, but that's the point we need to get to in preparation for the exam. Now, some general tips for the exam. So just make sure and relax. All questions have to be based on something you've covered in class. You can't and won't be asked on anything that you've never seen before. It's just going to be phrased slightly differently. Read the question carefully. So, for example, is the question asking you to state or list something, or is it asking you to explain something? Okay, because the difference in the question word can dictate how much you're expected to write. So a state or list question, bullet points is probably sufficient. If you're asked to explain, a lot more detail is going to be required there. Use a diagram if you can. So as the saying goes, a picture paints 1,000 words, and it can really help with your explanations and answers as well. And just remember, if you are asked to give a label diagram, that you do actually label it, because a lot of marks go more so for the labels than the actual outline of the diagram. Timing, so if you get stuck, just move on. So the time that you spend agonising over one question that you can't do will take time away from answering questions that you might be able to do further on. So just leave it, put a mark beside it and come back to it. And right now, coming up to the exams, exam papers should be your main focus. So practice them over and over and over again and use your marking schemes to grade them. Now, I'm going to go through some predictions, but before I go through any of this, I just want to say that obviously I don't know what's going to appear on the exam. Nobody has any way of knowing what's going to come up on the exam. This is just based on previous trends and what's come up, and also some topics which might not have come up in a while, but would be popular topics, so we could expect to see them on the day of the exam. Now, it is colour coded. I'll talk through the colour scheme and the numbers in the brackets at the end of each part in a couple of seconds, but just know that the blue at the top is Unit 1, the green is Unit 2, and the purple at the bottom is Unit 3. So I'm just saying where the topics are coming from. So for Section A, again, Unit 1 is food, scientific method and ecology. There's no surprises here as to what can be asked because there's so little topics that are part of Unit 1. But the ecology definitions and nutrient recycling will be something to look at here. The scientific method, so what's a hypothesis, what's the elements of good experimental design, where research results are published, etc. And then food, the structures of the biomolecules, their differences and their roles. Now the numbers at the end, what that means is it's referring to actually the ExamRevision platform. So if I just flick over to that for a second, so we could see that Unit 1. So if I click into video tutorials there, it's Unit 1. And I was talking about the scientific method possibly coming up, which is 1.1. So if we click into that, you'll see that there is a video there that will talk you through the entire scientific method. So I'm not going to press play right now because my voice will just start playing over myself talking, but it will talk you through the steps in the scientific method, limitations of the scientific method, and ethical issues associated with it. And we can see down here as well, if you were okay with the content and wanted just a quick stop tour of what was actually happening, you can actually speed up the video so it talks through it a little bit quicker for you. I'll just pop back to one of the other units as well. So we'll go back into biology. I was also expecting, say, ecology to pop up there. So there's ecology. Loads of videos there on introduction to ecology, factors affecting habitats, energy flow, the nutrient recycling, global warming, population control. There's lots of quizzes there for you to test your knowledge with as well. So if we click into energy flow, there's a multiple choice quiz there of 10 questions. You'll know right straight away whether you were correct or incorrect. And then right down here at the bottom, we also have our H1 notes. So if I click into ecology, every single thing that you need to know about ecology is laid out for you here. Okay, so this will really help you for when you're practicing your short answer questions in your exam papers. Now, just to flick back, for Unit 2, enzymes, always a popular question here. There was a big focus last year on enzymes within the experiment question, so it could move, I would say, this year to the short answer questions and the long answer questions. The levels of organisation, so tissues, tissue culture. It's been a while since tissue culture has appeared there. And then evolution and genetic engineering, so knowing the steps involved in genetic engineering and being able to describe examples or evidence for evolution will be something to look at as well. Unit 3, plant structure and reproduction. I feel like this could come up this year. It's been a while. Human reproduction has been coming up lately, but being able to know about the pollen grain, embryo, sac, so the plant sperm, plant egg being produced, the excretory system, so the skin and the kidneys, and then responses in both human and the plant. So the IAA experiment, it's come up as an experiment previous years, so I think this could move again to short answer, long answer style question. Now again, just for that, I'm just not going to go through them all, but if I just pick their enzymes 2.2, and I'll also pick evolution and genetic engineering 2.5, just to show you again on the website that there is loads of stuff available here for you already. So Unit 2, 2.2, cell metabolism, you'll see there's your enzymes, photosynthesis and respiration if you were looking as well. There's your quiz on enzymes, and we pop the whole way down here, click in, and we'll have a look at our notes for enzymes as well. So we can see here, description of what enzymes are, the different types of reactions that we can have, the induced fit theory, so the enzyme substrate complex and how they can change their active site to produce our products, and goes through the whole description here of the anabolic and catabolic enzymes, inhibitors, and factors affecting enzyme action. So everything you need to know is already there. Now, if we click back here again, onto our experiment questions. Question 8, I feel like it's going to be very similar to 2021. So it's going to be a mix of questions from all experiments because there's so few topics within question 8. I can't see them asking just one experiment unless it was to do with the habitat study. But it could be something similar, asking you why you perform certain steps, what chemicals are added. So for this, make sure you know the finer details of all the experiments. So know these ones in detail. Now, question 9 in 2021 focused exclusively on enzymes. The photosynthesis experiment hasn't appeared since 2018. So I definitely will be looking at the photosynthesis experiment here, which is the effect of light intensity on the rate of photosynthesis. And I'd also look at the production of alcohol by yeast, because I feel like photosynthesis and respiration, they come up hand in hand in the long answer questions. I don't see a reason why they couldn't come up hand in hand in the experiment questions as well. So it could be a mix of both the photosynthesis experiment and the respiration experiment. Question 10, again, I suppose things that haven't come up in a while here, doesn't mean they're going to be on the paper, will be the germination experiments and the heart dissection. Now for section C, again, ecology appearing here would not be a surprise because it tends to come up most years. So your definitions, your food chains, food webs, energy transfer diagrams, the pyramid of numbers, limitations of the pyramid of numbers, and the habitat study could be mixed in here. Photosynthesis and respiration, so the stages, the products, chemical equations, the difference between anaerobic and aerobic respiration. Enzymes, again, was an experiment last year, could move to a long question. So their protein nature, their roles, how they act, so the enzyme substrate complex. We've seen the notes on that already. The effect of pH and temperature on their activity. And then the uses and advantages of immobilized enzymes. And then genetics again, so DNA profiling, genetic engineering, and DNA replication. And then obviously our monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. And just to mention as well, the DNA profiling, genetic engineering, DNA replication, there has been a Saturday session on this already. So if you go onto the ExamRevision YouTube channel, you'll see it was back in October, as far as I know. You'll see that there's a full 1 hour session talking you through everything you need to know on that. Now, human reproduction has come up a good bit over previous years. So I could see plant reproduction making an appearance. Again, pollen grain, embryo sac production. Bacteria and viruses, so the growth curves of bacteria, the stages, the reproduction of both bacteria and viruses. Batch and continuous flow processing, so that's more associated with bacteria. And then vaccines and immunity. Transport in plants, the cohesion tension model, and also the detailed structure of the xylem and the phloem. And then the nervous and musculoskeletal system, so the structure and function of both in terms of the nervous system, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, structure of neurons, reflex arcs, and then the diseases associated with both. So I'm just going to quickly focus now on where you could find the section or the unit 3 material here. So if we look at transport in plants, which is 3.3, and the nervous system, we'll focus on 3.5. So we'll just switch over, go into unit 3, 3.3, and there we can see plant nutrition, digestion, digestive system, balanced diet. Go back here to the organism. If we look at organization of the vascular structure, we can see here we have the structure of flowering plants that could come up as part of reproduction. And 3.5, we have our plant responses. There's our nervous system over there, and our musculoskeletal system is down here. So again, viruses, immunity, everything is there. You have loads of quizzes to test yourself on, and notes will be available as well. So just on that then as well, just make sure that you don't take these predictions as Bible. It's just general trends that have come up in previous years. It doesn't mean that these topics are going to appear on the paper. It just means that some of them tend to come up more often than others. Some of them mightn't have come up in a while. Now, just for preparing for the exam, as I was mentioning there about the notes, there is a lot of material already available to you on the platform. So if you click into Leaving Cert Biology, you have full videos, full quizzes and full notes for every single topic of the entire biology course. Down here, what I'm talking through today, the video will be uploaded there. So the video from the 2021 exam is already there. I will upload the video for the 2022 exam as well. And if you click back onto the main page of the website, you'll be able to find everything you need to know about the pricing to do with the different subjects. So if you just click down there, plans and pricing, you'll find out everything you need to know. And it has switched from a once-off payment, so you can pay in monthly installments now, so it's a little bit cheaper. And if you wanted to just use it in preparation for the exam and then stop it after, that's absolutely fine as well. So definitely check out the platform in preparation for your exam. Don't forget the tips that we have while you're preparing for the exam. So I'll just flick back to them here. So relax, read the questions carefully, use diagrams if you can, just be mindful of your timing, and make sure at this point you're using exam papers to prepare for the exam. So the best of luck in your preparations over the next couple of weeks. You'll do absolutely fine, I'm sure of it. Make sure and use all the resources that are available to you. So there's lots available on the ExamRevision YouTube, lots available on the website. Check out our social media channels on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook and the likes. There'll be lots of tips popping up over the next couple of weeks. And the very best of luck in your exam in June.